Welcome to CosmoFactory, a podcast by Cosmoprof Worldwide Bologna, where we explore the entire cosmetics, personal care, and fragrance industry supply chain. I'm your host, Deanna Utrusky, and here at CosmoFactory, we look beyond the trends to discover the ideas, initiatives, and innovations that are truly advancing beauty. Let's get started. This episode is about neurocosmetics, psychodermatology, and haptic design. It's about the power of cosmetics and personal care to reduce stress, convey joy, and contribute to overall well-being. And it's about the importance of paying attention to both industry innovations and evolving consumer preferences. My guest on this episode of the CosmoFactory podcast is beauty and wellness trend forecaster Melissa Hago. Welcome, Melissa.
Hello, thank you for having me today.
No, I'm so glad you could join us. I'm excited to learn from you here. A lot of us who do writing or speaking in the beauty industry, do a bit of trend spotting throughout our work. But Melissa, you've specialized in beauty trend forecasting for nearly 20 years now. You're more of a professional when it comes to trends. So I'd like to just start off by asking you what trend forecasting actually is.
So, trend forecasting is predicting what trends and movements will impact consumer behavior in the future. It can vary from fast social trends like Black Summer, and focus on things like color, packaging, ingredients. And it could also involve bigger picture thinking, like trends that impact major lifestyle shifts. A good example is the aging well movement that focuses on how, as a society, we're moving away from terms like anti-aging and focusing more on longevity.
Yeah, no, excellent. Thank you for that explanation. And I'm curious, the CosmoFactory community of listeners is truly global. So I would like to ask if your work is focused only on particular regions or markets?
Well, I'm focused, as my title mentioned, on beauty, wellness, and food, but I'm not limited to a region. For me, it's all about this big picture thinking. So, a lot of the research really stems from what is happening in the world. And I think now, especially with social media and everyone being connected, it's really looking at, again, globally what's happening and then taking these cultural trends and applying them to the beauty industry.
Yeah, no, excellent. That's very helpful. And quickly, if you will, give us a little behind the scenes. I know we won't leave this conversation with a bunch of new trend forecasters in our audience. It's not that easy to learn. But how do you research the future?
Yeah, I mean, I immerse myself in everything. I read a lot, the news, industry articles, what's happening like I mentioned, even though I'm specialized in beauty, you still have to read what's happening in politics, science, technology, sustainability, now looking at social media, LinkedIn, attending events, small and big. A lot of people go to trade show webinars, but a lot of trends that I've written about have actually stemmed from small events of like 10 people. So really just anything educational. The key in trend forecasting is taking all this information and being able to pinpoint the movements that stand out as the next big trend. So a lot of it is really trusting your intuition and forecasting what's next.
Yeah, hearing how broadly you're looking at the world for your work reminds me a bit of the episode I recorded. I think it was episode 17 with Akshay Talati, who does a lot of formulation and cosmetic science. He talked quite a bit about looking very broadly for new perspective trends that they could use in product development. But what are some other ways that brands and suppliers in particular might make use of trend forecasting data?
Yeah, I think, trends are great because it's always good to know what's coming, what's next, where the consumer is gravitating to. And like I said, the trends, besides spanning from specific to big picture, they also span on time frame. It could be anything from, what's trending this year, what's trending in the next 5 years, or, even further ahead. So I think the most important thing is, you know, knowing your consumer, being able to understand what these trends are, but also knowing that there's a lot, there's a lot of trend. Not everything is for everyone. So I think just really knowing, okay, which ones should you jump on, which ones align with your brand value. I think that's the most important thing because sometimes, brands and suppliers are or companies can get, into the I need to be on this trend, but it's not the case. I think as long as the trend aligns with your company values, then it will make the most sense.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. I think that point about fit, right, between the trend and the brand or company DNA, really, that's a smart observation. I know that one of the trends you're following right now is something we might call neuroaesthetics. So I'd like to get into that. Tell us what neuroaesthetics is and why we are hearing about it now.
Yeah, so neuroaesthetics is a term recently coined in 1999 by neurobiologist Samir Zeki. Hopefully, I said that right. And it really explores how our brain reacts to beauty. So that can be art, music, nature. In the case of the beauty industry, I'm seeing more and more brands exploring this intersection of neuroscience and beauty, which we're seeing the term neurocosmetics. So this explores the connected pathway between the brain and skin. There's this two-way communication system allowing the skin to send signals to the brain via sensory neurons and in return receive responses. So again, it's about products that make you feel good at a neurological level by stimulating these neural pathways and producing happy hormones like serotonin, dopamine are just examples. And for beauty, we can experience neurocosmetics in different ways. It can be through formulation, packaging, texture, and even retail and shopping experiences.
Yeah,
As
excellent.
to, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say as to the why, because again, I think what's important about understanding trends is understanding why is this happening. I think, really over the years, wellness has been integrated in almost every market, and beauty is really no exception. I mean, it actually makes sense that wellness and beauty are connected.
Mhm.
And this is really beauty going on beyond that surface level solution. So, we've seen consumers starting to care about mental health, and there's also a societal need for joy. There's so much happening in the world. I can't even deal with the news these days. So, neurocosmetics is resonating because it's really that next level of merging beauty and wellness by focusing on that emotional well-being and again the connection between the mind with the brain, the body's nervous system, and the skin.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. So, one of my personal passions, listeners might already know, is ingredient science. So, I'd like to hear about ingredient innovations that fit into this sort of neurocosmetics trend, things that act as you suggested, maybe on the skin-brain axis. What are we seeing there?
Yeah, so CBD adaptogen peptides are some of the most common neuro
Hmm.
ingredients. Maybe not as innovative, but just common. But we are seeing skincare brands like Murray, which is Sisley's new brand focused on neuroscience. They're using ingredients like red indigo extract and skullcap, which can trigger neuroreceptors in the skin the same way your own brain signals would.
Uh-huh.
Another innovative ingredient is coming from manufacturer Mavel Biochemistry, and they're using shimmer pepper. It's a spice plant from the Himalayas, and their neuroactive ingredient are calling mood. And according to them, it can improve neuronal function in the skin and has a positive influence on one's mood and emotional well-being. And actually, IFX, LMR, Natural Active Essence, is also using the turmeric pepper, CO2 extract. So that's one, to really look at. And
Hmm.
the same with them. They have skin and hair care benefits, but again, they're also saying that there's an emotional and cognitive health benefit to this ingredient. And it's even been scientifically tested by IFS Brain Emotions Neuroscience Program. So those are some of you, I'm sure, especially because there's science involved into this, there's going to be even more coming out, but those are some of the ones on my radar.
Yeah, very cool. And you mentioned earlier sort of the skin feel or sensorial attributes of product formulations. What should we know about neurocosmetics and the sense of touch?
Yeah, I mean, touch is super important to neurocosmetics because it's that sensation of having that, positive impact on the nervous system. So the sensation that you feel in your skin through touch can produce stimuli that are transmitted to the nervous system. According to the brand Upcircle, they did a study that they had 3 lip balms, all with the same ingredients, different types of emollients, and each were appreciated differently. And it was all based on the texture, which was like super interesting. We know that, when we touch something, if it's slimy, we may have like that icky feeling, or if it's nice and like, silky smooth. So I do think, there is a lot of research about how, touch is super influencing one's well-being. Again, especially as we're putting it on our skin. And I thought it was interesting, the brand L'Oreal that I mentioned earlier, they're choosing textures according to their emotional profile and naming it neurotextures. So that's going to be interesting to kind of watch as more of that unfolds of like these textures that make you feel a certain way.
Absolutely. No, that's a super cool word. I hadn't heard about neurotextures yet, so I appreciate that note. And what about flavors and fragrances? Do these fit into the neurocosmetics trend, or are they sort of something else?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I flavor and fragrance, but they already kind of have that in their DNA, that make people a lot of times use fragrances to feel better, to feel a certain way. So I think, with neurocosmetics, it could also trigger that positive emotion through olfactory stimulation. And we're seeing more and more brands collaborating with neuroscience experts and labs to really enhance, we're seeing this next level functional fragrances. And again, like I mentioned, fragrances already tap into well-being. They have this feel-good emotion, but now seeing this fusion. So, to really create more of a well-being effects. Some examples include Cody's Adidas Vibes collection. According to the brand, the collection is scientifically proven to elicit positive emotions. And their consumer testing, at least 81% agree it makes them feel good. 85% say it boosts their mood. Or again, the scents are designed to make you feel positive while matching your mood at the moment. So whether it's looking to power up, relax, escape. Another one that I know, everyone wrote about that was on the news was Charlotte Tilbury. She launched her new line of fragrance. And, that I know it was lots of years spent on creating this. And she collaborated with perfumers, neuroscientists, AI, neurologists. It's like, okay, how do we incorporate the mind, body, and soul into creating this? And she even used IFF's scent cube algorithm, which identifies emotion enhancing ingredients. So, we're using all of that really to create these 6 mood boosting scents, which, they're saying for the perfume, it's emotion boosting molecules, to tap into specific emotions. So, just seeing that, I'm sure we're going to see more flavors and fragrances that are backed by neuroscience in order to create this certain feeling or really expand this new generation of fragrances and how they alter one's mood.
Yeah, yeah, and that makes me think a little bit about an episode I recorded where our guest talked about aromatherapy and the benefits that might have on emotional and physical health. That was back in episode 30 here of Cosmo Factory. And I realize, Melissa, as we're going through this, we're kind of separating out these different aspects, right? We've talked about fragrance, we've talked about skin feel, we've talked about the brain skin axis, but we know, beauty brands like to be very multifunctional and of course are very sort of, have multiple attributes and sensorial experiences or use case experiences. Do you have any notes on how these sorts of various factors that are affecting neurocosmetics are sort of coming together in products, or are you still really seeing it segmented? Like you just described, the Charlotte Tilbury fragrance is very much a fragrance, right? And then there's another product that might very much have that those sensorial textures that you described being focused on the neurocosmetics trend. Is it still quite segmented, or are you seeing brands merge these ideas?
I think fragrance is its own. That's why,
Yeah.
it's a lot about what are the ingredients, what do we want to make you feel. But in the end, it is about the whole experience. If the first thing you see is a packaging and then you touch it and then you feel it. So if I don't know, the touch is unpleasant, then you might not go ahead and open it to feel the rest of it. So I do think it is a whole, approach to the whole thing. I mean, New Ray is another. I mentioned them a few times
Yeah.
because their focus is neuroscience, and they're they want to make sure that their whole thing is about, again, the texture, the packaging. But yeah, I know it's segmented because a lot of brands may use it differently. There is a lot of science involved. There's a lot of claims. So maybe not every brand wants to have an ingredient because that's a lot to put effort into. Maybe it's just easier to have like a packaging that is ergonomic and that makes you feel a certain way. So I do think, that with this one, it's a little bit harder. It's like, it kind of makes sense to have it all, but because it's so complicated, I don't think all brands might, especially more in the formulation, I think that's where it gets the most complicated. I feel like maybe the packaging and texture are the quote unquote easier part. But once it comes to formulation, because you want to make sure that you're having, the science behind it and stuff, that it might not be every brand.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense with, newer trends and movements in the industry, as suppliers and brands get involved. They, I don't want to say they do the easiest thing first, but they want to find something that's accessible for their consumer, right? Or their partner. So it kind of makes sense to take the incremental steps like you're describing. And you've brought up the idea of beauty packaging. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about this idea of haptic design or ergonomics and how packaging materials and design figures in more specifically with neurocosmetics.
Yeah, so just like touch and texture, packaging plays a pivotal role because it influences how we experience a product. And they can elicit this emotional response, so making it more engaging. I think definitely seeing more examples like packaging manufacturer Lumsden, they created this texture on their jar, which to me is pretty interesting because usually packaging is just like pretty or colorful, but to actually have like some kind of texture that engages you, and their texture and the romantica jar, it's supposed to engage the somatosensory cortex. So it's a part of the brain that processes tactile sensation. So it almost feels like, again, this next level of packaging that connects to touch and adds this layer to the experience with the materials. And,
Mhm.
more and more brands are creating packaging products that are playful, satisfying to hold and operate. It's all about that feel good experience on an emotional level. I think that's, the part to remember about this trend is that it's about that emotional well-being, trying to be like, okay, what is this texture going to make me feel? What is this packaging going to make it feel? So I think that's what's important is that, we've had colorful packaging for quite some time. We've had really pretty packaging, but it's like, okay, now, what am I feeling when I touch it?
Yeah, yeah. And earlier you brought up the idea of neurocosmetics in the retail space. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So, I think we're also seeing the neurocosmetic, neuroaesthetics being embraced in all areas. Because again, it's that neuroaesthetics and neurocosmetics is that big picture thinking of like, in the end, what emotional response do we want from the consumers? So I think shopping will evolve to consider our emotions, to give us these experiences that, calm us or feel therapeutic. Neuroaesthetics reveals that our environment directly impacts our mental and physical well-being. So, besides the product, don't you want to also feel good when you enter a store? Studies have showed that environments rich in like nature and natural shapes, materials really help release neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, which are associated with pleasure and relaxation. So I really think, shopping experiences are going to change. They're going to be more fueled by emotional responsive. They're going to be more immersive experiences that engage sight, touch, sound, and smell. So it's not just all about the product, it's also about the whole experience when you go shopping.
Yeah, no, that makes very good sense. And you've suggested that in many ways, those are things you expect to see coming in the retail space. So a bit forward looking there. But as we wrap up our conversation, I'm hoping you can sort of finish this sentence for me. As the neurocosmetics trend progresses, I would not be surprised to see.
Let's see. Consumers wanting more claims and studies to back up these neuro-based products. So it's not just about trendy marketing.
Mhm, mhm. No, no, that makes sense. And if you can you just expand on that idea? I think
Yeah, I
it's
think
we're definitely go ahead.
no, being in trend forecasting, a lot of times, like I mentioned with brands earlier, being authentic is that brands will want to just jump on a trend because it's trending. But as we know, the consumer is becoming more and more savvy. They can see through, what's real, what's not real. So I think, especially, this was a hard one because we're talking to emotional well-being, but we're not saying this is going to like be your therapist. So I think, wanting to make sure that there's like studies behind it, and a lot of these brands that I mentioned are doing that work. So just having that work, having those claims, showing that, look, we spent time showing that these specific things are going to make you help with your the, neuros and things like that, and not just be a trending packaging of like, well, this will make you feel good because it's pretty. So I think that's what's important, and especially again, the hard part with trends is like sometimes people just want to jump on it and then do it to do it without having the research to back it up, especially when it's
Yeah.
a science-based trend.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Melissa, you are full of helpful information. I thank you so much for taking time to speak with me on the Cosmo Factory podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for listening. If you find the Cosmo Factory podcast useful, please take a moment to leave us a 5-star review and share your thoughts so even more cosmetic industry professionals can discover the Cosmo Factory. I'm Deanna Utrusky. Please join me again next Tuesday for a new episode of the Cosmo Factory podcast.